The Whisper of Destiny. The transport shuttle descended through Velthoria's amber atmosphere, and Marcus Thorne pressed his face against the viewport like an excited child. Below, forests of bioluminescent trees stretched toward horizons painted in perpetual twilight, their branches pulsing with gentle cyan and violet light. For an archaeologist who'd spent 6 years cataloguing dead civilizations, the chance to study a living ancient culture felt like a gift. "Dr. Thorne, we're approaching the capital city of Marinchal," the pilot announced. "The Empress has granted you unusual access for a human researcher. Don't waste it." Marcus nodded, adjusting his worn leather satchel. He'd prepared for this assignment with academic rigor, learning basic Velthorian customs, studying their crystalline architecture, memorizing proper greeting gestures. What he hadn't prepared for was the breathtaking beauty of their civilization up close. The city rose from the landscape like a dream carved from living gemstone. Towers spiraled upward in organic curves, their surfaces reflecting the surrounding forests in kaleidoscopic patterns. Citizens moved through aerial walkways, their graceful forms silhouetted against the luminous sky. Marcus's guide, a quiet scholar named Therin, led him through the festival crowds that evening. "The twilight gathering happens once every orbital cycle," Therin explained as they navigated streets filled with music and laughter. "The Empress herself attends to honor our ancestors." They reached the central plaza just as the ceremony began. Thousands of Velthorians had assembled, their attention fixed on the elevated platform where the royal court stood. Marcus caught his breath when he saw her. Empress Selira Marintil was younger than he'd expected, with features that seemed carved from moonlight itself. She wore robes that shimmered like liquid starlight, and her eyes held a depth that suggested wisdom beyond her years. As she addressed her people in melodic tones, Marcus found himself transfixed. Then something impossible happened. Selira stopped mid-sentence, her gaze sweeping across the massive crowd. Those luminous eyes locked onto Marcus with startling precision, despite the thousands standing between them. The entire assembly fell silent, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. The Empress descended from her platform with unhurried grace, and the crowd parted before her like water around stone. Marcus stood frozen as she approached, his heart pounding against his ribs. Her council members exchanged alarmed glances, but no one dared intervene. Selira stopped directly before him, close enough that he could see flecks of gold in her violet eyes. She studied his face with an intensity that made him feel simultaneously exposed and seen in a way he'd never experienced. Then she leaned forward, and her lips brushed against his ear as she whispered words that would change everything. "Human, I choose you to carry my legacy." The plaza erupted in gasps and urgent whispers. Therin stumbled backward in shock. But Marcus could only stare at Selira, drowning in the gravity of her presence, feeling the weight of something ancient and inevitable settling around his shoulders. "I don't understand," he managed to say, his voice barely audible. Selira's expression softened with something that looked almost like relief. "You will," she promised, taking his hand in hers. Her touch sent warmth flooding through him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, Marcus didn't pull away. The Harmony Test. The Chamber of Echoes existed in the heart of Velthoria's oldest mountain, accessible only through passages that seemed to breathe with the planet's own rhythm. Marcus followed Selira through corridors lined with crystals that hummed softly as they passed, their light shifting from deep blue to warm amber in response to the Empress's presence. "My people believe the planet itself is alive," Selira explained, her voice echoing gently off the crystalline walls. "For generations, our rulers have maintained harmony with Velthoria's consciousness through bonding rituals. Without this connection, the planetary network begins to fail." Marcus struggled to process her words alongside the surreal reality of walking beside an alien empress who had somehow chosen him from among billions. "But why me? I'm just an archaeologist. I study the past, I don't understand mystical planetary networks." Selira paused at a massive doorway carved with intricate patterns that seemed to move in the flickering light. "Our scientists have been scanning for compatible resonances for 3 cycles. Every instrument, every ancient text, every meditation led to the same conclusion: a human named Marcus Thorne, who would arrive during the twilight gathering." She turned to face him fully, and Marcus saw vulnerability in her expression that no one else had probably witnessed. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly. What if the prophecies are wrong? What if I've chosen incorrectly and doomed my entire civilization? Without thinking, Marcus reached out and touched her shoulder gently. Then we'll face that together. Something shifted in Salira's eyes, gratitude mixed with wonder. She placed her hand over his, and Marcus felt that same inexplicable warmth flowing between them. The chamber doors opened. Marcus stepped into a cathedral of living crystal. Formations stretched from floor to ceiling like frozen waterfalls, each one pulsing within a light. The air itself seemed to vibrate with potential energy, making his skin tingle and his breath catch. "Take my hand," Salira said softly, extending her palm toward him. Marcus hesitated only a moment before intertwining his fingers with hers. The instant their hands connected, the crystals erupted in song, a harmony so beautiful it brought tears to his eyes. Light cascaded through the chamber in waves of color, and suddenly Marcus was experiencing visions that weren't his own. He saw Salira as a child, learning the weight of her future crown. He felt her isolation, the loneliness of leadership that no advisor could truly understand. He witnessed her fear as she watched the planetary network's readings decline year after year, knowing her people's survival rested on her shoulders. And beneath it all, he sensed her hope, fragile but persistent, that somewhere in the vast universe, someone existed who could see her not as an empress, but as herself. The visions faded, leaving Marcus breathless and shaken. The crystals had settled into a steady, radiant glow that bathed the entire chamber in golden light. "It's true," Salira whispered, staring at their joined hands with wonder. "You're compatible. The resonance is stronger than any recorded in our history." They stood in silence for a long moment, neither wanting to break the connection. Finally, Salira led him from the chamber into a private garden adjacent to the palace. 3 moons hung in the sky above them, casting overlapping shadows across paths lined with flowers that glowed softly in the darkness. "I need you to understand something," Salira said as they walked beneath an arbor heavy with luminous blossoms. "This bond isn't just political or ceremonial. To complete the ritual, we must achieve genuine emotional harmony. Our feelings must be real." Marcus stopped walking, turning to face her. "And if they're not? Then we both fail, and Velthoria dies." She met his gaze with heartbreaking honesty. "I cannot command you to feel something you don't. The crystals respond only to truth." Marcus thought about the visions he'd experienced, the glimpses into her soul that had felt more intimate than anything in his life. He thought about her courage in choosing him despite the risks, and her vulnerability in admitting her fears. "I saw you," he said quietly, stepping closer. "In the chamber, I saw who you really are. And I want to know more." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and gently touched her cheek. Her skin was warm, softer than he'd expected, and she leaned slightly into his palm with a sigh that sounded like relief. "Marcus," she whispered, and hearing his name in her voice felt like music. He leaned forward, and she rose to meet him. Their kiss was tentative at first, exploratory and sweet, but it deepened as the uncertainty melted away. Around them, the garden's flowers bloomed brighter, responding to the genuine emotion flowing between them. When they finally parted, both were breathless. Salira rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. "This is real," she murmured, wonder and fear mingled in her voice. "Yes," Marcus agreed, his heart racing. "It is." The Council's fury. Morning light on Velthoria filtered through crystalline spires in shades of rose and gold, but the beauty was lost on Marcus as he stood before the Imperial Council. 12 advisors sat in a semicircle, their expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. Salira occupied the central throne, her posture regal but her eyes concerned. Chief Advisor Kael'vor stood to address the assembly, his voice sharp with barely contained outrage. "Empress, with utmost respect, this decision defies every tradition our civilization has honored for millennia. A human? An outsider who knows nothing of our ways." "The crystals have confirmed his compatibility," Salira replied calmly, though Marcus could hear the tension beneath her words. The resonance was unmistakable. "Compatibility with crystals does not qualify him to carry our legacy." Another council member rose, gesturing dismissively toward Marcus. He cannot understand our history, our culture, our very essence. This is madness. Marcus felt heat rising in his cheeks but forced himself to remain silent. Salira had warned him this meeting would be difficult, but the naked contempt in their voices still stung. Perhaps, Kael'vor said with dangerous softness, the Empress's judgment has been compromised. Choosing a mate is a deeply personal matter. Perhaps emotions have clouded her duty to her people. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Salira's hands tightened on the arms of her throne, but her voice remained steady. You question my judgment, Kael'vor? I question the wisdom of allowing personal attraction to determine the fate of Velthoria. Then let me be absolutely clear. Salira rose, and the room fell silent. Without a compatible resonance keeper, the planetary network will collapse within 1 generation. Our forests will wither. Our crystals will go dark. Our children will inherit a dying world. Every scan, every calculation, every ancient rite of divination has pointed to Marcus Thorn. I did not choose him on a whim, the universe chose him, and I was wise enough to listen. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tension. Finally, Kael'vor bowed stiffly. As you command, Empress. Though I pray your faith is not misplaced. The formal session ended, but the damage was done. As Marcus walked through the palace corridors afterward, he felt the weight of hostile stares from every passing courtier. Whispered conversations stopped when he approached, only to resume with venomous speculation once he passed. That evening's banquet was torture. Marcus sat beside Salira at the high table while nobles made cutting remarks barely disguised as polite conversation. Tell me, Dr. Thorn, said Lady Vessa from across the table, her smile sharp as glass, what qualifies a human archaeologist to understand the sacred mysteries of Velthoria? Have you studied our spiritual texts? Mastered our meditation practices? I'm learning, Marcus replied carefully. How convenient that the Empress's chosen one requires such extensive education. The implication in her tone was clear, that he was unworthy, that Salira had made a terrible mistake. Marcus felt his face flush, but before he could respond, Salira's hand covered his beneath the table. She squeezed gently, a gesture of solidarity, before addressing Lady Vessa with quiet authority. Dr. Thorn's worthiness was confirmed by the Chamber of Echoes itself. Unless you suggest the planetary consciousness is also mistaken. Lady Vessa paled and quickly looked away. But the hostility lingered throughout the evening, a poison that seeped into every interaction. Late that night, Marcus found himself alone in the guest quarters assigned to him, a beautiful suite that felt more like a gilded cage. He stood at the window, staring out at the luminous city and wondering if he'd made a catastrophic mistake in agreeing to this. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. He opened the door to find Salira standing there, no longer in her formal robes but wearing a simple gown that made her look younger, more vulnerable. May I come in? She asked quietly. Marcus stepped aside, and she entered, closing the door behind her. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Salira's composure cracked. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry for what they said to you. You don't deserve their cruelty. It's not your fault. Yes, it is. I chose you, knowing what you'd face. I put you in this impossible position because my people's survival demanded it, and now, her words dissolved into a sob she tried desperately to suppress. Marcus crossed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms. Salira clung to him, her shoulders shaking with the weight of everything she'd been holding back. He stroked her hair gently, murmuring reassurances he wasn't sure either of them believed. I feel so alone, she admitted against his chest. I've always felt alone, even surrounded by thousands. The weight of the crown, the expectations, the constant judgment, sometimes I can barely breathe under it all. Marcus pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. You're not alone anymore. I'm here. But for how long? What if you decide this is too much? What if you leave? I won't, he said firmly. I don't fully understand what's happening between us, but I know this, I've never felt more connected to anyone in my life than I do to you. Those visions in the chamber showed me your heart, Salira. And it's beautiful. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Marcus wiped them away gently with his thumbs, cradling her face in his hands. Then he kissed her, softly at first but with growing intensity as she responded. This kiss was different from their first, more desperate, more needful, a confirmation that they were in this together regardless of the consequences. When they finally broke apart, Selira rested her head against his shoulder, her breathing gradually steadying. They stood like that for a long time, finding comfort in each other's presence while the hostile world waited outside. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "Just stay. I don't want to be alone." Marcus led her to the sitting area, and they settled together on the cushioned bench beneath the window. Selira curled against his side, her head on his chest, while he wrapped his arms around her protectively. Outside, the three moons traced their paths across the sky, and inside, two people from different worlds held each other against the darkness, discovering that love could bloom even in the most impossible circumstances. The fracturing empire. Marcus woke to the sound of distant explosions. He bolted upright, momentarily disoriented, before remembering he'd fallen asleep with Selira in his arms. She was already awake, standing at the window with her hand pressed against the glass, her expression stricken. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, joining her. "Kale Vor," she said quietly, her voice hollow. "He's made his move." Below, sections of the city were dark, their usual bioluminescence extinguished. Military vessels hovered over the palace district, and Marcus could see figures moving through the streets in organized formations. Within minutes, Therin burst through the door, breathing hard. "Empress, the chief advisor has declared you unfit to rule. He claims your bond with the human has contaminated the royal line and threatens Velthoria's future. Half the military has sided with him." Selira's jaw tightened. How many remain loyal? Enough to hold the palace for now, but not enough to win a prolonged conflict. "Empress, you need to reach the sacred caverns and complete the resonance ritual. It's the only way to prove the bond's legitimacy before the planet's core destabilizes completely." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "How long do we have?" Therin's expression was grim. "The network readings have been declining rapidly. Days. Perhaps. Maybe less." Selira turned from the window, and Marcus saw the leader she truly was, no longer the vulnerable woman who'd wept in his arms, but an empress ready to fight for her people. "Therin, organize our loyal forces to create a diversion. Marcus and I will take the underground passages to the sacred caverns. You'll be unprotected. We'll be faster alone. And if we fail, it won't matter how many soldiers defend this palace." She looked at Marcus, and he saw both determination and fear in her eyes. "Are you ready?" He took her hand. "Together, remember." They fled through hidden corridors that wound deep beneath the palace, passages so old the crystals lining them flickered weakly, their light struggling against the growing darkness. Selira moved with practiced ease, but Marcus could feel her tension in the way she gripped his hand. "Tell me about your world," she said suddenly as they navigated a particularly treacherous descent. "Tell me about Earth." Marcus understood. She needed distraction from the weight of what they faced. "It's beautiful in a different way than Velthoria. We don't have bioluminescent forests or singing crystals, but we have oceans that stretch to the horizon and mountains that pierce the clouds. Sometimes I miss it. Do you regret coming here?" He stopped, pulling her to face him in the dim passage. "Not for a second. Before Velthoria, before you, I was just drifting. Going from dig site to dig site, cataloguing the achievements of dead civilizations while my own life felt empty. You gave me purpose, Selira. You gave me something to believe in." She kissed him then, fierce and quick. "When this is over, if we survive, I want to see Earth. I want to understand the world that created someone like you." "It's a promise," Marcus said, though neither of them knew if they'd live to keep it. The passages opened into vast underground caverns where massive crystal formations grew like ancient trees. But something was wrong. The crystals that should have been radiant were dim and fractured, dark veins spreading through them like disease. "It's worse than I thought," Selira whispered, her voice breaking. "The network is collapsing." They pressed deeper into the cavern system, following paths that seemed to exist more in Salira's instinct than in any visible markers. Marcus heard water dripping somewhere in the darkness, and the air grew thick with moisture and the scent of minerals. Finally, they reached the heart of the caverns, a chamber where a single enormous crystal formation dominated the space, its core pulsing weakly like a dying heartbeat. This was Velthoria's consciousness made manifest, and it was failing. "What do we do?" Marcus asked. Salira approached the crystal reverently, then turned to him with an expression that mixed hope and terror. "The ritual requires complete emotional unity. We must open ourselves entirely to each other. No barriers, no secrets, no fear. Our hearts must beat as one." She extended both hands toward him. Marcus took them, stepping close until they stood face to face before the dying crystal. "I'm afraid," Salira admitted. "Not of death, but of failing my people. Of being remembered as the Empress who let Velthoria die." "I'm afraid too," Marcus confessed. "I'm afraid I'm not enough. That I'll let you down when you need me most. Then we'll be afraid together." They pressed their foreheads together, hands clasped between them, and Marcus felt something shift, a barrier dropping, a door opening. Suddenly he was experiencing Salira's emotions as if they were his own. Her love for her people, her determination to protect them, her fierce hope that this impossible bond could save everything she held dear. And flowing back to her, he knew she felt his own truth, that he'd been searching his entire life for a place to belong, and he'd found it not in ancient ruins or distant planets, but in her. That he loved her with an intensity that terrified him. That he would give anything, everything, to see her succeed. The crystal responded. Light erupted from its core, spreading through the chamber in cascading waves. The dark veins began to recede, and the crystal's song, silent for so long, rose again in a harmony that resonated through Marcus's very bones. He and Salira gasped simultaneously as energy flowed through them, their joined hands becoming conduits for the planetary network's restoration. Marcus saw visions of Velthoria as it once was and could be again, forests blazing with life, cities thriving in harmony with nature, people connected to their world in ways Earth had long forgotten. He saw a future where he and Salira stood together, bridging two civilizations and proving that love could transcend any boundary. The ritual reached its crescendo, and Marcus felt as though he and Salira had become a single being. Two hearts beating in perfect synchronization, two souls merged into something greater than either could be alone. Then, slowly, the intensity faded. They stood breathless and trembling before the crystal, which now blazed with restored brilliance. Throughout the cavern, other formations were lighting up one by one, like stars being born. "We did it," Salira whispered in wonder. "We actually did it." Marcus pulled her into his arms, and they held each other in the radiant chamber while above them, unknown to them yet, the planet itself was responding. Throughout Velthoria, dying forests surged back to life. Darkened crystals reignited. The very air seemed to shimmer with renewed vitality. "I love you," Marcus said, the words coming easily now. "I don't care if it's too soon or too complicated or impossible. I love you, Salira." She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I think I have since the moment I chose you." They kissed then, deep and passionate, celebrating not just their survival but the genuine connection they'd forged through impossible circumstances. And the crystal sang around them, a joyful harmony that echoed through the planet's consciousness, confirmation that this bond was real, was right, was exactly what Velthoria needed. The new dawn. They emerged from the caverns to find the world transformed. Dawn was breaking over Velthoria, but unlike any dawn Marcus had witnessed before. The sky blazed with aurora-like colors, emerald and sapphire and gold, while every plant, every crystal, every living thing seemed to pulse with renewed vitality. Theron was waiting for them at the cavern entrance, tears streaming down his face. "The entire planet felt it," he said in awe. "The moment you completed the ritual, it was like Velthoria itself exhaled after holding its breath for generations. Even Kael'vor's forces have stopped fighting." Salira squeezed Marcus's hand. "Take us to the city. I need to address my people." The journey back revealed the extent of the transformation. Forests that had been merely luminescent now blazed with life so vibrant it seemed almost sentient. Crystal formations that had grown dark over decades now sang in harmonies that made Marcus's heart soar. Citizens emerged from their homes to stare in wonder at the restored world around them. By the time they reached the central plaza, thousands had gathered. Kael'vor stood among his military forces, but the fight had clearly left him. He stared at the transformed landscape with an expression of stunned disbelief. Selira ascended the platform where, just days ago, she had first approached Marcus. Now she stood before her people not as a desperate ruler making a controversial choice, but as an empress who had saved her world. "My people," she began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd, "you have witnessed today what many doubted was possible. The planetary network has been restored through the resonance ritual, completed with Marcus Thorn, a human, yes, but also the person whose spirit harmonizes with mine and with Velthoria itself." She gestured toward Marcus, who climbed the platform to stand beside her. "I know many of you questioned my choice. You saw him as an outsider, unworthy of carrying our legacy. But the crystals do not lie. The planet itself does not lie. Look around you. This restoration is proof that the bond between us is genuine and powerful." Kael'vor stepped forward from the crowd, and Marcus tensed. But the chief advisor's hostility had transformed into something more complex, shame mixed with reluctant acceptance. "Empress," Kael'vor said, his voice heavy, "I challenged your judgment and nearly tore our civilization apart because of my prejudice. I see now that I was wrong." He looked at Marcus directly. "You are not what I expected, Dr. Thorn. But the evidence is undeniable. You have saved us all." Selira's response surprised everyone. "Kael'vor, you acted from a place of fear for our people's future. Misguided, yes, but not entirely without cause. I offer you a choice: exile, as tradition demands for those who attempt rebellion, or remain and help build the future you nearly destroyed." The crowd murmured in shock. Kael'vor stared at her, clearly not expecting mercy. "You would allow me to stay after what I've done?" "My bond with Marcus has taught me that genuine unity requires forgiveness as much as strength. Our civilization will need all of its wisest minds to navigate the changes ahead. Will you be one of them?" After a long moment, Kael'vor knelt. "I will serve faithfully, Empress. This I vow." The gesture rippled through the crowd, and one by one, even those who had supported the rebellion knelt in acceptance. Marcus watched in amazement as Selira transformed a moment of potential vengeance into one of healing and unity. The formal recognition ceremony took place that evening under skies painted with impossible auroras. Marcus stood beside Selira before the assembled court, feeling surreal as ancient words were spoken that bound him officially to her and to Velthoria itself. "Do you accept the role of Resonance Keeper?" the ceremonial elder asked. "Do you pledge to maintain harmony between the Empress and the planetary consciousness?" "I do," Marcus said firmly. "Though I ask that I remain human. My strength comes from being who I am, not from becoming something else." Selira smiled at that, pride evident in her expression. "Granted. Let it be known that Marcus Thorn carries our legacy as himself, a bridge between worlds, a proof that unity does not require sameness." The ceremony concluded with their union, not a marriage in the human sense, but something deeper, a formal acknowledgement that their souls were intertwined with each other and with the planet itself. When Selira kissed Marcus before the celebrating crowd, the entire city erupted in bioluminescent brilliance, as if Velthoria itself was rejoicing. Later, in the privacy of Selira's chambers, now their chambers, they stood together on the balcony overlooking the transformed city. The 3 moons hung like jewels in the sky, and everywhere Marcus looked, he saw life thriving as it hadn't in generations. "I still can't quite believe this is real," he admitted, wrapping his arms around Selira from behind. "A few weeks ago, I was just an archaeologist with no real direction in life." Selira leaned back against him, sighing contentedly. "And I was an empress facing the collapse of everything I was meant to protect. Now look at us. Do you think it will be difficult? 2 worlds, 2 cultures trying to build something together." "Absolutely," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "There will be misunderstandings and challenges we can't even imagine yet. But Marcus, we stabilized a dying planet through the strength of our connection. I think we can handle whatever comes next." He kissed her softly, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her, to love her. "I want to show you Earth someday. Introduce you to my world the way you've introduced me to yours." "I'd like that. Though I imagine arriving with an alien empress might cause quite a stir." Marcus laughed. "That's an understatement. But it would be worth it to see your face when you experience your first Earth sunrise, or taste chocolate, or hear ocean waves." "Tell me more," Selira murmured, pulling him toward the bed where they settled together, wrapped in each other's arms. And so Marcus spoke of Earth while Velthoria sang around them. Two people from impossible distances who had found each other against all odds, proving that love could be the strongest force in the universe. Their legacy would be one of unity, of bridges built between worlds, of the courage to choose connection over fear. Outside, the auroras danced, and the planet itself seemed to hum with contentment. The crystals sang their ancient songs, but now with a new verse added. The story of an empress and an archaeologist whose bond had saved a civilization and proved that sometimes the most unexpected choices were exactly right. As they drifted towards sleep in each other's embrace, Marcus whispered, "I'm glad you chose me." Selira smiled against his chest. "I'm glad the universe led me to you. Welcome home, my love." And in that moment, Marcus finally understood what he'd been searching for all his life. Not ancient ruins or academic accolades, but simply this: someone to belong with, someone whose heart beat in rhythm with his own, someone who saw him and chose him exactly as he was. The dawn would bring new challenges, diplomatic complexities, and the work of truly uniting two civilizations. But tonight, under Velthoria's singing stars, two souls who had found their perfect harmony rested together, ready to face whatever the future held, together.